It's great to be with my friend Wang Shi. We were together during my visit to Beijing a few weeks ago. And what an historic time for China and the United States to be joining together to give fantastic momentum to this process. Minister Xi, I want to express my gratitude to you personally for the tireless work that you have done over the years, and especially in the months and weeks leading up to this agreement between President Xi Jinping and President Barack Obama. It is a wonderful, wonderful occasion. It's good to be here with Achim Steiner, the Executive Director of UNEP, and speaking of tireless labors, you and your colleagues have done a fantastic job. And my dear friend, Dr. Andrew Steer, the CEO of the World Resources Institute, on whose board I served for many years, and thank you. I look forward to your remarks as well. I know we have many distinguished guests here. Peter Bacher, I'm not going to try to mention everyone who deserves to be acknowledged, but thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come here. This meeting in Lima, so wonderfully hosted by the government of Peru, is already historic. We are privileged to be in this city at a time when the groundwork is being laid for a successful agreement in Paris 1 year from this week. And as I mentioned earlier, the historic handshake and historic agreement between the President of China and the President of the United States has had an electrifying impact on the world's efforts to solve the climate crisis. I myself am extremely optimistic, and all the more so listening to Minister Xi this morning, and I hope that my colleagues in the United States will read a translation of your remarks on the inadequacies of GDP, because it does not measure some of the most important economic realities that we have to deal with. GDP does not measure the depletion of natural resources. It does not measure the production of pollution. The economists refer to negative externalities. This is the kind of phrase that induces sleep, but it actually hides a very important reality. GDP also does not measure positive externalities, and partly as a result, we have chronic underinvestment in education and healthcare and community services and family services, and it does not measure the distribution of net worth and income. And again, that is part of the reason we have a crisis of inequality growing in the world, in the United States, in China, in the European Union, in Peru, in almost every country in the world. Here in Lima, we are at a fork in the road. One way leads in the wrong direction, the other leads in the right direction, toward Paris, and then from Paris toward a sustainable future. It is important that we are joined not only by representatives of governments, but also representatives of NGOs, and critically, by representatives of private companies and public sector companies, many of whom are now leading the way and producing an important source of optimism as they invest in renewable energy, solar energy, wind energy, energy efficiency, sustainable forestry, sustainable agriculture. These new patterns of economic gain will mark the road toward the future. Already, if you look at the 100 largest companies in the world, 60 of them have set clean energy targets. This is especially important because we face another fork in the road. We must turn away from continued obsession with carbon-based energy and turn toward the energy sources of the future. And we must incorporate sustainability principles into business plans as well as into government policies. I know that there are other speakers, and I will keep my remarks brief. I will have the privilege of making some longer remarks here during these sessions, but before I close, I would like to refer to three poets. One who wrote in the Chinese language, one who wrote in the Spanish language, and one who wrote in English, an American poet. First of all, the famous Chinese author Lu Xun wrote, "Hope is like a path in the countryside. Originally, there was no path, but once people begin to pass, a way appears." These words are strikingly similar to the famous words from the Spanish poet Antonio Machado, often quoted here in Peru. He lived in almost exactly the same decades as Lu Xun in the turn of the 19th and 20th century. And he wrote, "Traveler, there is no path. You must make the path as you travel." We have all made a path to Lima. And while we are here, we are seeing people begin to pass in large numbers with similar ideas. And a way forward has appeared, as Lu Xun wrote. And when we go to Paris, we will take with us our hopes and our dreams. But they will not be unrealistic dreams, because even though some have begun to wonder if this process supervised by the United Nations is going to have a successful conclusion, I know that it will. And I would like to close with the words of the third poet from the United States, who was a businessman who became a poet. His name was Wallace Stevens, and he wrote these lines: "After the last no comes a yes, and on that yes, the future world depends." Every great reform movement in the history of humankind has met with a seemingly endless series of no's. But after the last no, there was a yes, and women were granted the right to vote. Slavery was made illegal and unacceptable. Civil rights were granted in country after country, regardless of all the old distinctions that were once used to justify discrimination and injustice. And now we see, as we face the climate crisis, the last no will yield to a yes in Paris, and the way forward is being made here in Lima.